Tonight, you'll lie down and try to sleep straight through until morning. One long, unbroken stretch. It feels obvious, natural, the way humans have always slept. It isn't. For thousands of years, almost nobody slept in one block. Your ancestors fell asleep not long after dark, and then, in the dead of night, they woke back up. On purpose, every single night. And they weren't panicking about it. They weren't lying there in the dark, begging for sleep to come back. They got up. They lived a little. And what they did in those quiet, waking hours is one of the strangest, most human things we have completely forgotten about ourselves. Because for most of human history, nobody slept the way you slept last night. They didn't sleep once, they slept twice. The person who pieced this together was a historian named Roger E. Kirch. And he wasn't even looking for it. He was studying the history of nighttime, what people actually did between dusk and dawn, back before there was much light to push the dark away. And he kept tripping over the same odd little phrase, over and over, in diaries, in court records, in old medical books, in poems and prayers. People wrote about their first sleep, and then, a bit later, their second sleep. Not first as in the first night of a journey, first as in the sleep before the waking. At first it's easy to read right past it, but once you notice it, you can't stop. Kirch found this reference not once or twice, but more than 500 times, scattered across centuries and languages. There was a French version, an Italian version, a Latin version. It was everywhere, which leaves a quiet, slightly unsettling question. How do you lose a piece of human experience so ordinary it had its own name in every language? And almost nobody alive today has even heard of it. Here's how the night actually used to go. A couple of hours after dark, people would settle into their first sleep. Not at a fixed bedtime, there were no clocks ticking on the wall telling them they were late. Just sometime after the sky went black, because honestly, what else was there to do once the sun was gone and a candle was precious? They'd sleep for maybe 3 or 4 hours, and then, somewhere around midnight, they'd surface. Not jolted awake, not anxious, just up. Their bodies simply lifted them out of sleep into a soft, drowsy wakefulness. This stretch had names too. Some people called it the watch. Some called it the watching. A window of an hour, maybe 2, sitting in the gap between the 2 sleeps. And then, when it passed, they'd sink back down into their second sleep and stay there until the first grey light came through the shutters. 2 sleeps, with a little island of waking floating in between. And here's the part that's easy to miss. Nobody taught this. There was no rule, no schedule pinned to the wall. It just happened, on its own, to almost everyone. Which is a strong hint that the body was doing something it genuinely wanted to do, which leaves a rather lovely question. If half the world is lying awake at 1 in the morning, every single night, with an hour to spare and nowhere to be, what on earth are they doing with it? And the answer is, a little of everything. Quiet things mostly. Some people prayed. There were entire devotional manuals written for this exact slot of the night, with prayers meant to be said in the dark between the sleeps. Some people just lay there and turned the day over in their minds. And here's a detail I find oddly lovely. Because the waking came right after a few hours of sleep, people often used it to reflect on the dreams they'd just stepped out of, while the dreams were still warm and close. A built-in moment for the mind to wander. And some people got up. They tended the fire. They checked on the animals. They did small, quiet chores that didn't need much light. But it wasn't all candlelit contemplation. Some people got up and visited their neighbors. A quiet, half-asleep social hour in the middle of the night. And a few, the court records are happy to tell us, used the cover of all that darkness to slip out and commit the odd bit of petty crime. The night had a whole little economy of its own. But here's the detail I can't quite get over. This waking hour was considered a fine time, maybe the finest time, for a couple to be together. And this wasn't folk wisdom whispered between neighbors. Actual physicians recommended it. The reasoning was charmingly practical. By that point, you'd had your first sleep, so you were rested. You weren't exhausted at the end of a long day. You'd both surface in the quiet dark, warm and unhurried, with nothing pulling at you. One 16th century doctor put it plainly, this was the best time to conceive a child. which means the middle of the night, the hours we now mostly spend staring at the ceiling, wondering what's wrong with us, used to be one of the warmest, most human parts of being alive. So if this was so normal, for so long, so thoroughly woven into ordinary life, where did it go? Why have almost none of us ever heard of it? And here's the strange part. It didn't vanish in some distant prehistoric fog. It faded recently, within the last couple of centuries, close enough that your great-great-grandparents may have been among the last people to do it without thinking twice. The thing that ended it wasn't biology, it was light. For nearly all of human history, when the sun went down, the world went genuinely dark. A candle was a small, expensive thing, so the night was long and empty, and a body had time to drift through 2 sleeps with a gap in between. Darkness was just the enormous fact of the night. And then, slowly, we lit it up. First came gas lamps, glowing on street corners where there had only ever been black. The evening, for the first time, became a place you could go. Then, in the 1800s, electric light arrived, and the night basically lost the argument. You could flood a whole room, a whole street, with daylight that never burned down and never went out. And suddenly the evening stretched. People stayed up later and later, reading, working, talking, doing things that used to be impossible after dark. The night got shorter from one end, and that gentle midnight waking got pushed toward the edges, and then off the page entirely. There just wasn't room for it anymore, but the light was only half of it. The other half was an idea, and ideas are sneaky. The factories came with their shifts and their whistles. Work was suddenly measured by the clock, not by the sun, and a new belief took hold, that the night was simply time being wasted, that sleep was almost an inconvenience. Hours spent unconscious were hours you weren't working, weren't producing, weren't getting ahead. The old, leisurely 2-part night started to look like a flaw. So we squeezed our sleep into a single, efficient 8-hour block. And then we did something funny. We decided that block was the natural, correct, eternal way humans were always meant to sleep. But that solid 8-hour night we treat as timeless, the gold standard, the thing you're failing at when you can't manage it, is barely 2 centuries old. It's an invention, and a fairly recent one. Now, you could hear all of this and think, fine, it's a charming historical footnote, but it's gone. Our bodies have surely moved on. Except here's the strange part. There's an experiment that suggests our bodies haven't moved on at all. In the early 1990s, a sleep researcher named Thomas Vare did something simple. He took away the artificial light. He put a group of people in darkness for 14 hours every night, roughly the length of a long winter's dark, the kind our ancestors lived in for half the year, and he just waited to see what their sleep would do on its own. At first, they slept like exhausted people catching up, but after a few weeks, something surfaced. Their sleep came apart, into 2 pieces. They'd sleep for a stretch, wake calmly in the middle of the night for an hour or 2, lie there peacefully, and then drift back down into a second sleep. Nobody told them to. Their bodies simply remembered. Take the artificial light away, and the old pattern comes drifting back, like a tide returning, which brings us, gently, to you. There's a good chance you already know this moment. You wake at 3 in the morning, the room is dark, the house is still, and you are wide awake for no reason at all. And the feeling that comes with it, almost instantly, is dread. Something's wrong with me. My sleep is broken. I'll be wrecked tomorrow. And the harder you chase sleep, the further it backs away. But what if it isn't broken? What if that 3 a.m. waking isn't a malfunction at all, but a memory? The watch, the watching, the soft island in the middle of the night, surfacing in a body that still half remembers how it used to be done. Not insomnia, just something very old, knocking quietly to be let back in. The difference between you and the woman by the embers 400 years ago isn't the waking. You both wake. The difference is that she expected it, and you've been taught to be afraid of it. Researchers are careful here, and we should be too. This is a strong, well-evidenced theory, not a settled law of the body, and not every restless night has an ancient explanation. But the next time it happens to you, the next time you find yourself awake in the dark at some hour that feels wrong, maybe try not to fight it. Our ancestors didn't lie there panicking at 2 in the morning. They didn't reach for a phone and count the hours they were losing. They just woke and let the night be the night and trusted that the second sleep would come, because it always did. So maybe you don't have to panic either. Maybe you can just lie there a while, in the quiet, the way almost every human who ever lived once did, and an hour later drift back down into a second sleep you didn't know you still knew how to take. Isn't it strange and kind of wonderful, the things our bodies remember that we've completely forgotten? That something we've been taught to call a disorder might really be something very old, just trying to come home. If you like questions like this one, the small, quiet ones hiding inside ordinary life, come wander with us. Subscribe to Whymsy and we'll keep finding them together. Good night.